like to welcome you here today for Michael Ruhlman, who's going to be talking about his book, Grocery. He's been a writer, a chef, a gadget maker. My connection with him was through a food and cooking blog a long time ago, and came across some of the kitchen utensils that he helped put together and sell. And then when I saw his name come up for a talk to come here, and the topic of groceries and sort of the psychology behind them and the mechanics behind them and the history, it all seemed fascinating because he comes at food and cooking from sort of oblique angles all the time. So very glad to have him here today. And with that, Michael.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for being here. The spoon he was talking about was is called it's such a long title. I've forgotten. I haven't said it. Well, it's the badass perforated.
Oh, badass. Yes, the
badass perforated, AKA egg spoon.
Yes, for making poached eggs.
Because I didn't like all the flyaway stuff in eggs when you poach an egg, and so there are many whites that compose and different proteins that compose an egg white. Some are thin, some are viscous and thick. If you let the thin ones drip through, you're left with this beautiful viscous white, and it makes a beautiful poached egg. So that's the connection. But we also have offset spoons, because a friend of mine said, "Mike, I can make anything you want. I manufacture stuff," and I had a spoon that I'd bent for cooking, so I made some offset spoons. I made some flat edge wooden spoons, because I hate round wooden spoons, because round wooden spoons are useless, but that's all that I see in people's kitchens. So I try to make tools that are not available or things like that. So, but mainly what I do is I write. And I think that I've gotten some popularity but because of just sort of my ranting and shooting off at the mouth. I started cooking. I never meant to be here. I was a journalist, copyboy at the New York Times when I got out of Duke University, English major. And I got a book contract to go to the Culinary Institute of America to write about what it meant to be a chef. And I realized very quickly that you couldn't know what it meant to be a chef unless you became one. I was dressed like a student. I had my knife bags. I was learning how to chop and dice and everything. After 3 weeks of basics, we lived, my then wife and our little baby daughter lived 25 miles north of the Culinary Institute of America, and a big snowstorm hit the Hudson Valley. And I couldn't make it in to take the test. The first test of my career there, just the basics, how to make a bechamel sauce, how to chop. And I really wanted to, but I called the chef, Mike Pardis, 37-year-old guy from Connecticut, but kind of a hard ass. I called him, and I said, "Chef, I can't make, obviously the Hudson Valley is snowed in, I can't make it in." He said, "Okay." So "You don't understand, Chef, I really want to be there. I'm taking this seriously, and I would be there if I could, but I can't." He said, "Okay." I said, "No, you don't understand, Chef. I really want to be there, and I'd be there if I could, but I can't." He said, "Michael, I want to stop you right there." He said, "Part of what we're teaching these kids here, what it means to be a chef, is it's not that you know how to concasse a tomato or dice an onion or make a bechamel sauce. Is that when you're a chef, you get there." I said, "Well, Chef, I get there if I could, but I can't." He said, "That's fine, Michael. You have your work, we have ours. We're chefs. We get there. We like it like that." And he hung up the phone. And my heart was thumping, and I was pacing, and I told my wife what had happened, and she said, "So basically he's calling you a wuss." And I didn't really respond to that because I'm so upset. And then she looked at me and said, "Oh, you're not driving 25 miles through a blizzard to make a bechamel sauce." I drove 25 miles through a blizzard to make a bechamel sauce, and that changed my life. Honestly, it changed my life. We talk about cooking from the heart. We talk about cooking out of love. I learned to cook out of anger. Chef Pardis had guilted me into coming, had told me that I couldn't do it. I was furious. I made it in. Obviously, I could. I was lying to myself. He told me, and that's one thing you learn when you're a really good cook. You can't lie to yourself. I was lying to myself. I could make it in, and I did make it in. And from that day on, I vowed to become a cook. I wanted to become a cook. So I learned how to become a cook, and I also was the journalist that I needed to be in order to write a book. And I finished the culinary, and 9 months later I was working the grill station at the best restaurant at the CIA. And then I came home. My then wife looked at me and said, "We're going to be broke in 4 months. You got to write this book in 4 months." And it took me, you can't write a book in 4 months. I'd written one book before then on an unrelated subject, and it took me 8 or 9 months. And you can't write a book in 4 months. But I didn't think like that anymore because I'd gotten there to the snowstorm. When the chef says, get there, you get there. When you write a book in 4 months, I'll write a book in 4 months. I went to my contract, found out that I had to write 90,000 words to fulfill the contract. I figured out that if I wrote 1,400 words a day, 5 days a week, taking Saturday to revise, Sunday off, I would have a book in 4 months, and I had a book in 4 months. And so I used those muscles as a chef to fulfill my obligations as a writer. And I really think that everybody should learn to be a chef before they do anything. We'd have a lot fewer excuses, and we'd operate a lot more effectively and efficiently. That's kind of how I got where I am. Suddenly I was a journalist, but then I had something that almost no other journalist had, which was a foundation in the culinary basics. And through a fluke of luck, after I finished the book, I was broke. I couldn't find another book. I said, I'll get a job as a cook. I went out to the middle of Ohio, this restaurant. I knew this woman was well connected. She could get me a job with the best chef in Cleveland. I could make a paycheck and keep writing about something I cared about, which is food and cooking. And she looked at my stuff and she said, "Oh my God, I'm working with Thomas Keller at the French Laundry, and we're looking for a writer for our cookbook." It's like, at the time, Thomas Keller was a god among cooks. So I was a broke, unemployed writer who had no national bylines or credentials for writing about food. I walk into a restaurant in the middle of Ohio called Styx, because it was so far out in the sticks, and I walk out with tickets to the French Laundry 2 weeks later. That's God sort of saying, I know you want to be a novelist, Michael, but you're good at writing about food. You're going to write about food. And once I did that, once I wrote the French Laundry cookbook with Thomas Keller, I had a fundamental knowledge of the culinary fundamentals. I had a knowledge of what those fundamentals could do, taken to the highest level at then considered the best restaurant in the country, if not the world. Ruth Reichel, later that year, would call it the most exciting restaurant in America. And then I realized, it's important, writing about food. I liked writing about food. At the time, I didn't quite realize it was important, but as I continued writing about it, I thought some other journalists did better things, did more important. They covered wars and things like that. They covered politics. I was just writing about bechamel sauce and veal stock. Is that really important? But as I kept writing and as the country kept growing, and I realized that we were becoming so obsessed with our food. Where our food, what does it mean? What is it doing to us? We're turning chefs into celebrities. What's going on here? Food is important. And I'd sort of lost track of that. I just took it as it was obvious to me that food was important, but I didn't quite realize it until I saw all the problems that were happening because of our food system and what we're doing that we'd stopped cooking. Our healthcare system is, it's $1 billion a day problem, diet-related diseases. People have crazy allergies. You have recent health problems. These are not, when I was growing up, I didn't know anybody with a peanut allergy. I didn't know anybody who was allergic to eggs. Now there are kids. So something's happening to our food system, and I realized that this was important. And we need to consciously acknowledge food is important. Food is really important. I think we become obsessed with food because when something you need to survive starts making you sick, you become very obsessive about it. It all sort of crystallized for me, and this book sort of began when I was standing in the grocery store with dinner, some hamburger buns and a bottle of wine and some Lay's chips, I believe, and some Greek yogurt. And I was standing behind a lady who was sort of, I don't know, 40-ish, dressed for business, probably coming home from work, grabbing some stuff for dinner and the home. And she put a carton of fat-free half and half on the conveyor belt. And I looked at it. I often wondered, who buys fat-free half and half? Half and half is defined by the amount of fat in it. And so I couldn't help myself. I asked this seemingly intelligent woman, excuse me, ma'am, can I ask why you're buying fat-free half and half? And she looked at me kind of puzzled and said, because it's fat-free? And I said, what do you think they replace the fat with? And she'd never really thought of it. She picked it up right there and read, skim milk, corn syrup. She looked at me, frowned, put it back on the conveyor belt, and bought the fat-free half and half anyway. That moment sort of crystallized a lot of things for me. That we don't think about our food. That we allow other people to do our thinking for us. That we think fat is bad is one example of that. Fat, we're taught that fat is bad. Fat is not bad. Too much fat is bad. Too much of anything is bad. Lettuce, I'm here to tell you, lettuce is dangerous. Lettuce can be hazardous to your health. If you only eat lettuce, you will become malnourished, you'll become sick, and women will become infertile. So be very careful when you're at that salad bar. Same thing is true with fat. If you eat too much fat, if all you ate was fat, that would be bad. We need fat to dissolve various vitamins. It's good for us, and it tastes good. I'm just fond of saying fat isn't bad, stupid is bad. We need to think more clearly about food. For this grocery book, I went shopping with my physician, and she, picked up some kale, and she said, it drives me crazy. People call this healthy. Kale isn't healthy, she said. I said, it's not? She says, no, kale is nutritious. We are healthy. Our food isn't healthy. Our food is nutritious or it's not nutritious. We are healthy if we eat nutritious food. It begins with words. Our understanding begins with words. We're not going to be able to make good decisions about what we buy, what we feed our families, what we cook, unless we think clearly about food. The second thing I think people need to know is nobody really knows anything. All these studies drive me absolutely bananas. The fact that in the 70s we were told not to eat eggs because they were bad for us. Cholesterol in the yolks, obviously they're going to make our blood serum cholesterol go up. We were told for more than a decade that the egg, this miracle of economy, nutrition, deliciousness, and functionality in the kitchen was bad for us. Food for our humans for millennia, bad for us. Not true. Further investigation, what the actual studies now show is that if you have low cholesterol, eggs will raise your cholesterol. If you have high cholesterol, eggs don't affect your cholesterol. That seems to be what the study shows. So the eggs sort of are helping you find the right balance for your cholesterol. Again, people say, "Oh, how do I know what to eat? What do I eat?" What I tell all people how to eat is, don't pay attention to how something tastes or how you feel while you're eating it. Pay attention to how you feel after you eat it. I love Pringles potato chips. One of the most heavily processed foods on the planet. It's delicate, crispy, tastes vaguely like potato, salty. I love those things. But if I eat a whole tube of them, I feel shitty. But if I eat a buttered, steak with a nice crust of salt on it, a baked potato with a slab of butter on it, and some green beans, I eat that, and I feel good afterwards. That's my body saying, yeah, that's nutritious. And here's a thing with the word. Now, you look at that plate and you see all the butter and you see salt and stuff, and if I were to ask somebody, is this healthy? Is this plate of food healthy? It's harder to answer, but if you say, is this food nutritious? That's much easier to say. Yeah, you've got a good protein there. Sorry for the vegans here. You've got a good fat, dairy fat. Sorry. Vegan is hard. I don't know about how I would live as a vegan. Not that I am against it for any reason. I respect your reason to be a vegan. It's just hard. It's hard and unpleasant. And there's so much pleasure to be had in cheese and butter and things like that. I think it's easier to think about food if we think of it in proper terms with the proper words. And so this is just what I do. I write about food, I write about these issues, and I try to make sense of things. And my father loved grocery stores. He would go to 5 different grocery stores in a day. Loved them. They were sort of bounty itself. You could get so much cool food. But for him, it was like frozen appetizers in the frozen food store. But he loved grocery stores. He loved going. He loved looking at other people's baskets. Wonder what they have. They've got something better than I have. Or said, and he once said to me, you know, when I retire, I think I might bag groceries. When he died in 2008, I was bereft and upset and depressed. And I think that's part of why I went a few months later to a small grocery store in Cleveland, Ohio, to look into where we buy most of our food. You know, grocery stores were interesting to me. They're a retail store that we use like no other store. They are filled with, I mean, it's where most of us, it's the only store most of us have to go to once or twice a week. They are a symbol, and during the Cold War, they were a symbol of American capitalism and prosperity. They're a mirror of our culture. They show what we're afraid of, what we're curious about, what we don't know, what we crave, shows you how big we are. This one store I went up to Heinen's. It's sort of like a Wegmans, like, I don't know, what's a good quality grocery store here? Like, I don't know them up in San Francisco area. Anyway, this is sort of a high-end grocery store. They had about 20 stores, and during that first meeting with the brothers, I learned that this one store did $600 million in sales yearly. This was more than half $500 million a year in sales, and yet they only made a $6 million profit every year, a 1% profit, which is a really sort of scary margin to work on. And yet they're responsible for our food. One of the things I want to know is, how can I get pea pods 365 days a year, as much as I want? And not just in the Heinen's stores, any of their 20 stores, but in 100 stores around Cleveland. And at the 38,000 grocery stores in America. Where was all this food coming from? Where did it come from? And that's why I wanted to look into grocery stores. And I found that I realized ultimately how much I loved grocery stores. They're often, most people think of them as chores or sort of a headache or a place you have to go to endure, get in, get out. I began to see grocery stores as a remarkable institution in America, a place where we get all kinds of food, both nourishing and crummy food, but that's up to us. All kinds of food for relatively inexpensive, at an inexpensive cost. It's extraordinary that we have so much food, and I think that we need to appreciate the food. So that's all I did. I hung out at grocery stores. I bagged groceries, and it was amazing to watch a river of food come down, just an endless river of food, an extraordinary volume of food. This one store, for instance, brings in every year 32,000 pounds of carrots, week after week, year after year. And what's, I think, even more astonishing than that, if you extrapolate that, 20 stores does about 30,000 pounds of carrots a week. Multiply that by 32,000 or 38,000 stores. That's a lot of carrots that we go through, and they're all mainly grown in one place, Bakersfield, California. About 95% of our carrots come from Bakersfield, California, and in fields so vast they have to fly to them. That's how much room it takes. So all these issues just came into focus when I started to look into the grocery store, and I think it's important because cooking. It's ultimately important because cooking is important. I'm going to talk for 5 more minutes about why cooking is important and related to the grocery store, and then I hope have some sort of dialogue about what matters to you about food. but for me, cooking is more important than we realize. There's a great book called How Cooking Made Us, Catching Fire, How Cooking Made Us Human. Do any of you know that book? It's by, do you know it? Have you heard of it? It's by Richard Wrangham, a primatologist at Harvard. And he argues persuasively in this book that it wasn't the taming of fire that made us triumph as a species. It wasn't a genetic fluke that tripped us over from our hominid ancestors to Homo sapiens. It was the cooking of food. At the time, there were about 12 upright different species or different versions of this animal that we have become. We began cooking food at some point, and it changed us. Once we cooked food, before we cooked food, we had to sit in one place by ourselves, masticating pounds and pounds of raw vegetation in order to get enough calories to support this big body of ours and this calorie-hungry brain of ours, which uses about 30% of the calories that we take in. Once we started cooking food, we could consume extraordinary amounts of calories very quickly and very efficiently. This made us very healthy. It allowed us to spread our genes. It changed our anatomy. Our gut shrank because we didn't need to fill it up with massive amounts of vegetation. Because we weren't shoving pounds of vegetation down our throats, it conceivably allowed us to develop a more delicate, refined vocal anatomy that allowed for nuanced language instead of sign language, which we were using at the time. And it did something else really important. In order to take advantage of the genetic advantages, the health advantages of cooked food, we had to work together. Cooking takes work. We had to work together. Someone had to stay at home and cook the tubers while the men went out and looked for the high protein items, which were hard to get and often were hard to come by. We would then share. We shared in the work. We shared in the eating. You couldn't be an asshole anymore because you wouldn't get any food. You'd be ostracized from the group. So we learned to cooperate. And arguably, sitting around eating this food, we learned to talk together and to work together. And this allowed us to cooperate and arguably allowed us to protect ourselves, strategize, and ultimately become the most successful species on the planet because of cooking. Move forward to the 1950s and 1960s when we largely stopped cooking our own food. And that is precisely when our health concerns begin. It's when social alienation begins to be documented. And it's the beginning of all our health problems. So when I question whether the veracity of that claim that cooking made us human, I look at what happens when we don't cook, and I look at all the problems that there are today. And that's why I think that cooking is important. That's why I think it's important to know what's in your grocery store. And that's why I will write that, as I did in the Washington Post, which I think will come out tomorrow, that things like breakfast is the most dangerous meal of the day, because 90% of our households rely on cereal, which is basically sugar. And it's not just the sugar, it's the refined wheat that it's made from that becomes sugar pretty much as soon as it enters your bloodstream. We need to think about these things because if we're not healthy, we're not happy. And if we're not healthy, we don't have healthy families. So ultimately, a book about groceries is a book about the importance of cooking and my conviction that when we cook our own food, our bodies are healthier, our families are healthier, our communities are healthier, and our environment is healthier, all of which are fundamental to our happiness. And so that's why I wrote Grocery, basically, to look into where our food comes from. And thanks for listening to me spiel. I'd rather have a conversation and talk about things that matter to you guys, and answer questions as to why you're here and what you care about regarding our food system, or just the food that we eat. Because the center of the food system, the center of the grocery store is like nutritionally bankrupt by and large. The periphery we know is good for us. All the stuff that goes bad is good for us. The way they make food shelf stable so it can sit on the middle shelves is to take out all the nutrition in it. The nutrition is what goes bad. So you want to, if your food doesn't go bad, you probably should think twice about eating it. Those Pringles that I love so much, they'll be good for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's not good. So are there any questions? Any topics somebody wants to talk about? Yes.
I want to know more about your involvement with a group of investors who are trying to, I don't know, take over Whole Foods or influence it somehow.
Well, I have nothing to do with Whole Foods personally. So nothing between me and Whole Foods. Whole Foods is a really interesting story right now. Whole Foods really changed. If there was one person who really changed our food system, it's probably John Mackey, who is the founder of Whole Foods. He, more than anybody else, convinced farmers that they could make a living by growing organic food. Most of the grocers I talked with say supermarkets did not want to carry organic food because people wanted it. They started wanting it. We couldn't get enough of it, they said, until Whole Foods came along. They went national in 1988, and that's really when organic became viable. They convinced enough cattle growers and meat packers to grow their beef without hormones and antibiotics. This made it possible for normal grocery stores that didn't have the buying leverage that Whole Foods had to buy hormone-free beef that's better for us. Now, but and that leads to their problem now. They were so good at what they did, they created so much of this food that it's now available to all the grocers. So all the grocers have just what Whole Foods has. And now the only thing that distinguishes Whole Foods from a grocery store is higher prices. And so that's why they're in trouble. And that's why they're creating this 365 chain, which is basically just a grocery store now. So that's what's happening with Whole Foods. And I don't know what's going to happen to them. They want a big investor because they're in trouble. The downside is that we could see the demise of Whole Foods. The upside is we can get that same stuff at our local supermarket these days. So that's what's up between me and Whole Foods.
Sorry, I read something more specific, that you were involved with a specific group of investors who were trying to get on the board and...
No, I'm not. No, I'm
okay.
A writer and journalist, and I'm not associated with any investors.
Okay, thanks.
As I mentioned, I had some health issues recently, and I did a lot of research about what I should and should not eat. I came to the conclusion that I should stop eating refined sugar and refined wheat, and you briefly mentioned that. But I love bread, and I did a lot of research and found out sourdough is okay to eat. Do you have some insight to share on that topic?
Yeah, well, I will tell, I wouldn't listen to anybody when they make nutrition claims because nobody knows what the fuck they're talking about, bottom line. There haven't been the double-blind long-term studies necessary for any definitive conclusions about what's good for us, what's bad for us. There's some certain common sense things, and there is more and more evidence, and this does make common sense, and it's my personal bias and my opinion only, that it is sugar and refined grains that are causing the majority of problems, largely related to the insulin release that happens when either these refined grains or sugar come into your bloodstream. You get too much sugar, it triggers an insulin response. There's not enough insulin to deliver this energy to where it ought to go, and so it's stored as fat and creates all kinds of other problems. So yeah, I would agree. And the nutritionist doctor that I spoke with always advises her clients, stay away from stripped carbs. Here's another, I was talking about words. She says there's stripped carbs. We talk about refined wheat. Refined has good connotations. It's pure. It's more, it's refined. It's not refined. It's stripped of its nutrients. That's what it is. So she wants us to think of not refined wheat, but stripped wheat, stripped of its nutrients, fortified. We have to fortify. Fortify is good. Well, we have to fortify stuff because we took all the good stuff out of it. So we got to try and put it back in there. I think your suspicions are right about refined wheat and grain, especially when there is no, especially in the morning, ironically, when there's no there's no fat, there's no fiber, there's no protein that slows the absorption by your blood. So, you know, I don't want to give up pasta. I love bread too. What I think you need to do is not be afraid of bread, but eat good bread, eat good sourdough, eat foods that still have a fiber matrix. You know, cornflakes don't have any fiber. All the fiber has been taken out of them. That's the stuff that slows its absorption into your bloodstream. So have bread, but have some protein with it as well. Have some fat with it as well. Don't just eat pure bread. I wouldn't just have a bowl of pasta with some oil on it. I'd have other things too. So minimize that sugar. Try to eat as little as possible before noon. This is what that doctor recommended. It seems to make sense. But by then you're ingesting other stuff to slow the absorption of the refined wheats and sugars that we eat. But I would agree, yeah, stay away from sugar and stay away from refined grains.
Hi, haven't read the book yet. I'm excited to do so. I'm wondering.
It's just out today, so there's no way you could have really read it.
It's 3 o'clock.
That's true.
That's cool.
Right. You had plenty of time.
But I'm wondering, do you touch on in the book anything about food distribution systems and issues with monoculture and diversity of product in stores and like food miles and all of those sorts of
I don't
issues?
get heavily into that because I found that stuff, while important, it's really boring. And it's hard to write an interesting narrative using about that. It is important. The other part of that equation is it's incredibly complex. The issues of monocultures is a serious one. If we rely on monocultures, we are jeopardizing our food system, and we can't. If we allow Roundup and Monsanto, these companies, to develop products for us, we're in danger. Is it a good thing that we now can get blueberries from Uruguay in the winter when we never used to be able to? Well, it's good for those farmers in Uruguay. Is it bad for the food miles? Cargill will tell you one thing and farmers here will tell you another, and both have their points. It's a very complicated system, and it was outside the purview of the book. I talk about what I don't write in the book because I felt so overwhelmed. The grocery store represented our entire food system, and it was so complex and so baffling that I had to pick and choose where I went. But those issues are important. We're dealing with them every day, and I don't have the answers to, is it a good thing that we can get blueberries from Uruguay or strawberries from Chile in January? My sense is that it's probably a bad thing, but we set up a system, we set up expectations here in America that we can get anything we want whenever we want. And until we stop demanding fruit that's out of season, we're going to keep getting it. Because that's one thing I do know, that when you buy something at the store, when you take something off the shelf, you're asking for more of it. It will be replaced. That's their job. So when you buy a can of Pringles, they're going to put it back. If no one bought Pringles anymore, they disappear. You know, we've seen our grocery stores go from selling, you know, the only herb I knew when I was growing up was parsley. Now we have a whole range of herbs. We have all kinds of fruits and vegetables just because we want it. We've created really good food in our grocery stores just by demanding it. So I guess the only thing that I would say to you is if you believe in multicultures, not monocultures, buy those foods that encourage the creation of a diverse crop. Don't buy monocultural products. They won't come back.
So one thing that I've noticed is that you can get a diversity of product in cities, in places where people are demanding the diversity of product, but then it is probably flown in from all sorts of different places where they grow that diversity. But if you actually go out closer to where food is grown in this country or like the middle of America or just outside of cities, that the diversity of product is much lower because of the way that the distribution system is set up. And if anything, it seems odd that like the food probably didn't travel from down the road where it might have been grown, but from some other place, like you're saying, like the blueberries from Uruguay. Anyway, I look forward to reading the book.
Thank you. It's a tough problem. I'd be grumpy if I couldn't have coffee because I don't live in an area that grows coffee, or get olive oil. It's a big world, and we have a lot of opportunity. And I think we're just we never even thought about these before, but these are issues that we need to think more and more about, and there are no good answers right now.
What does it really mean when we say a food is organic? Is there a certification process? Like when I see a food in the store and it says organic, what does it actually mean?
It means it is certified by the government as organic. Any farmer that wants to sell or call his or her food organic is certified by the government, and it costs a lot of money to get it certified. So it is certified. There's various rules that they're looked at. There, no pesticides and all that. And so it is organic. Has organic then been co-opted by business? In many ways it has. Is organic even better? We don't know, but we suspect that it is. All the pesticides, especially, there's a number of pesticides, but one I look at is glyphosate, which is in the chemical Roundup. That seems to actually doesn't affect our health per se, but it really screws with our gut bacteria, which we really need. We have more bacteria in our systems than we have actual cells. That's how much bacteria we have. And so I think that organic food is a better choice, regardless if it's big business organic or not. And remember that just because something isn't called organic, it may be just as good as organic because that farmer is small and doesn't want to pay for an expensive certification. And that's too bad, that we need to recognize what's meaningful organic, what's not meaningful organic, what's almost organic or just as good as organic as well. But to answer your question, it's certified by the government as being pesticide-free, and there's a whole range of qualifications, but it is all organic. Often you can get organic stuff in the normal produce. If they run out of something in your grocery store, they'll just put their organic and not even label it organic. But anything labeled organic must be organic and certified as such.
So unquestionably, one of the reasons that people are pushing more towards processed foods and more towards these really quick, ready-to-eat foods is that they're fast. It's instantly available. I grab it off the shelf. Like you said, it can last forever, seemingly. So how do we make better foods more convenient?
I don't think we can make them any more convenient than we already have. They're pretty convenient. I mean, is 3 minutes in the microwave not convenient enough for you? I mean, it used to be 30 minutes of a frozen pot pie in the oven, and that became too long. And then 9 minutes in the microwave was too long, so they said, let's get it lower. I think the problem is in the way we think. The problem's with us. We want convenience and we want cheap. One of the food marketing researcher I talked with said, our food is never going to change because we are cheap and we are lazy, and we're always going to be that way. So any food that saves us time or saves us money, it's going to keep coming back. That's going to be your fad. In fact, it's not even if it saves us money, because I can always make more money. Can't make more time, so it's got to save me time. This is the wrong message, I think. What we need to realize, what people need to understand, is that the cooking of food should take more time. We have to reevaluate how we spend our time. The food companies said they were going to make our lives easier, more convenient, better by cooking our food for us. Has it gotten better? Are we healthier? Do we have more time? No, we have even less time. Our food couldn't be more convenient. We have even less time. So what's going on here? We need to rethink about how we allocate our time and recognize that spending time shopping, cooking, sharing that cooking with our friends and our family, and cleaning up afterwards is valuable. You don't hear anyone saying, God, I really love showering. I just can't find the time. No one says that. We find the time to bathe. We find the time to do what we like. We find the time to watch TV. Some of us even read still. I hope so. It's a matter of recognizing that the smells of cooking in a house are stress relieving. They relax us. Food brings us together and makes our lives better. So it's a matter of recognizing the importance of cooking, what we give up when we just put things in a microwave. Convenience is not a real convenience, and cheapness is a lot more expensive than we realize. So it's the way we think about food and cooking, and that's mainly what I care about and what I try and preach. And it's preaching, I agree, but I think it's important.
Thank you.
In the book, you go back to sort of the genesis of groceries as raw materials, that you did have to take a lot of time to process or shell or soak or whatnot, right? But to some extent, I think you can buy time today by getting, pre-cut vegetables and things like that and saving on the prep time, but you're still doing the cooking, right? And I'm curious, because I think you have a chapter in there which is people don't know how to cook anymore, right? And they buy, arguably nutritious meals prepared at groceries now. But are you seeing sort of that other part, which is you take a step back, which is you still go home and you cook, right? And there's all different kinds of online services now that you can get someone else to be your prep chef for you, right?
Right.
Are you seeing more of a trend like that to sort of shorten things in terms of time, so buying time and still doing cooking at home?
Yeah, certainly we are finding that we want to cook, we just don't want to do all the work, so we're going to pay someone else to do it for us. There was a lot of talk about growing our own food. Some people really do grow their own food. Bless you for doing that. I think it's great. But for the most part, we didn't start growing our own food. What we did was we started supporting farmers markets. We paid other people to do it for us. Now we're getting people to do our prep for us. We're getting Blue Apron and HelloFresh to do our prep for us. We're buying pre-chopped onions at the grocery store, which I think is fine. I think that's fine. I think if more people use Fresh Direct or not Fresh Direct, Blue Apron or HelloFresh, they're going to realize how easy cooking really is. And they say, "Oh my God, that was so easy. I know how to get 2 scallions together and a clove of garlic and a protein here," and we'll go back to cooking. They may teach us how to cook again. Maybe that's how we learn to cook again. The comment about nobody knows how to cook came from the woman who did the prepared foods at this store. She said, "I'm just astonished. Women don't know how to hold a knife. Nobody knows how to cook anymore." And it's possible that a huge swath of our population, because our food was prepared for us, never learned how to cook. And that's scary. So we need to relearn how to cook. And I hope places like Blue Apron help us to do it. It is getting more and more popular. And I would say because it saves us time, if those companies like Blue Apron can make money, I don't think they're making money yet. If they can make money, they're going to stick around because they're saving us time and they're helping us eat better food and nutritious food. So I'm all for that. Well, thank you very much for being here. Cook your own food. It makes life better. Thanks for listening to me on my soapbox here. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.